Good evening and welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Highland Park Plan and Design Commission for November 7th, 2023. Mr. Fontaine, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Arnold.
Here.
Commissioner Mantis.
Present.
Commissioner Bruckman. Commissioner Kirsch.
Present.
Commissioner Hecht. Vice Chair Moore.
Here.
Chairman Hainsfurther.
Here.
We have a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you,
I do
Mr. Fontaine.
recognize Student Representative Jackson Roberts, as well as City Council Liaison Annette Lidor, and a Corporation Counsel Marcus Martinez.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Carlos Marcus Martinez. So it's our job to get him on a reasonable train tonight home.
Yes.
All right. Huh? Oh, don't even say that time. Before, we're shooting for the 8, we're shooting for the 8:37.
Yeah,
Right?
Yeah, I think that
Okay.
was a typo.
We have a number of items tonight to go through. We have approval of minutes from our regularly scheduled meeting of October 17th. And then we have under scheduled business, a design review for car storage with variations at 1200 Old Skokie Road, a design review for proposed fence and variations at 425 Bloom Street. We have 2 public hearings, one of which I understand will be continued, and that's the public hearing related to the trigger for plan development and plan unit development requirements and applicability. That's 2023 ZTA 007. And then we have a new public hearing, 2023-ZTA-010 for a zoning text amendment to modify regulations for tents and similar structures and other sections of the zoning code. All right, with that, I will take a motion for approval of the Plan and Design Commission minutes of October 17th with a requested amendment that staff has requested.
So moved.
And Chair,
Yes,
might I also add one more correction to the minutes?
Sure.
Please? On line 14 on the minutes, page 4, comments by Senior Planner Burhop. It says PUD is also an SUP. That is correct, but that should add to that comma, but there are important differences.
okay.
Thank you.
So.
Second.
Okay, so the motioner and the seconder accept that additional correction, correct?
Yes,
Correct.
correct.
Okay. All right, any other comments or corrections?
Yes.
Yes.
On page 5 of the packet, at line 10, I think we need to clarify that where it says reference page 33 and noted a delineation from the vacuum cleaner to the sidewalk, that should say delineation of the driveway to the vacuum cleaners that runs along Elm Street to the sidewalk along Elm.
I don't think it was the vacuum, it's just the
Well-
sidewalk and the driveway
The driveway that's
that
turning
leads
back,
to
yes.
okay.
Yes, so however all right, so a delineation of the driveway from the sidewalk along Elm Street.
That's fine. Yep, I think that's
What
correct.
page was that again?
That is
Page 5 of the packet,
line 10.
10.
Thank you.
Any other corrections? Nope. All right, all in favor of adopting the motion to approve the meeting minutes as amended and corrected, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions?
Aye.
One abstention, so motion passes. The minutes have been adopted. All right, first item of scheduled business is design review for car storage and variations at 1200 Old Skokie Road, otherwise known as Tesla dealership. Mr. Burhop, who is going to be presenting this to us tonight.
Yes, Senior Planner Rati Akash, and I do want to introduce her to the commissioners for those who may not know Rati. So Rati is a senior planner. She's been with the city for over a year, actually, and she does the Housing Commission and some HPC work. And of course, she does assist with the Plan and Design Commission as well, and mostly administrative design reviews, but other projects as well. And so I just wanted to introduce you all to my colleague, Senior Planner Rati Akash.
Welcome to us. We'll try and be gentle to you.
Sounds good.
And it's always nice to see somebody other than Carl up there, so.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Carl, and thank you, Chairman.
One thing open there, and then whatever else you need to open.
Okay.
So we have here the design review for a parking lot expansion for Tesla at 1200 Old Skokie Road. The project location the entrance is off Old Skokie Road, but it does have visibility if you're driving northbound or southbound off of Skokie Valley Road. So basically the application request, this could have easily have been an administrative design review. They really don't have space, and with the growing demand of cars for Tesla, they have to get this storage parking, inventory parking. So they're expanding it to the south. But they need a variation for that 10-foot wide landscape buffer along the street, along 41. So background, let me just give you a quick background. In 2014, Tesla dealership came before the PDC, and this was basically for renovating their space. They were expanding that building, and so there were exterior modifications. And I think in a year later, they came back for a sign package with the signs which they have up there. And then since then, and as we all know, Tesla has grown. There's a huge demand for EV cars, and they're hence proposing to expand the parking lot to the south. So just to summarize this really quickly, the subject property at 1200 Old Skokie Road is located in a light industrial district. The proposed parking lot expansion to the south measures 26,315 square feet. So the site improvements here basically includes there are 2 dead trees, and forestry has reviewed that. They don't have any issues with it. And of course, the proposed new parking lot, there's no landscaping and it's not required because this is for storage parking. But the only thing that's required is that 10-foot buffer by 41. And there are site lighting, and we can go through that, and they meet everything except for that one variation. So this is the surroundings. So we're looking at Tesla, and when we're looking west, we're looking at it where we have light industrial, and then we do have some of the residences on the east, so they have been notified. So we've notified the condos, we've notified some of the single family residential units there. And the closest residential unit to the Tesla building and the parking lot is about 300 feet. So I just want you to bear that in mind. And also another point to note is most recently, and I can come to that, let's go through the proposed parking lot expansion. So like I told you, it measures 26,315 square feet. And if you can see down south, that the one which is bubbled in red is what they're expanding. And the site improvements, like I told you, it's just the extension. So of course it's going to be asphalted. There are 5 lights that are going to be proposed on this parking lot. They do meet all the lighting requirements. We'll get into photometrics at a later point. And in total, there are 82 parking spaces proposed here. And a point to note when it comes to landscaping, so we do have design review standards, and the design review standards for this site references the photometrics as well as the landscaping code. And they meet all the requirements for landscaping except for that 10-foot wide landscape buffer that's required. So I just want to point out, I know I was here at PDC last year when Genesis had their review, and I wanted to tell you, and then, just to give you a little bit more context, they did get a variance. They got a variance for they provided a 5-foot landscape buffer, so they needed a variance for the other 5 feet. But just to point out, Genesis had a combo. They had a combo of customer parking as well as storage and inventory parking. But this is this is just inventory parking. And if you do look at the site, it's a very tight site. Like I mentioned to you, the building that Tesla is there currently is shared with other tenants. I think there's a fitness center and there's an athletic center, Elite, next to it. So it's a shared building. They don't have much parking in front except a little bit there and then coming down south. And then the other thing to note is the uniqueness of how this site is shaped. It's a really tight site and they need that parking. And hence they're not able to provide that. And I feel that's the hardship for them. And coming to lighting, and I know we've spoken in length with Tesla, they are going to meet the 3000 Kelvin for those 5 luminaires proposed. Everything else for photometrics they meet. They do meet the height as well as the bug lighting. And they have provided a comprehensive photometric plan. And I just want to point out, in respect to departmental reviews, this has already gone through permitting. Forestry has reviewed this. They're okay with the 2 trees coming down. Engineering has reviewed the civil plans and they've worked with Tesla and addressed any and all concerns there. Fire department has reviewed this for the fire truck turning radius and car stacking, and they have no issues. So all the departments have no issues or concerns. I do want to point out for design review particularly, there are 2 things that actually need to be addressed. One is the site plan review. And for the site plan review, they meet all the requirements, again, except for the landscaping, for that 10-foot buffer. And for lighting, they meet all the requirements as well. And thank you.
Thank
If you
you.
have any questions.
Questions for staff, starting for the right. Commissioner Arnold.
So if they aren't able to provide the 10-foot landscaping buffer, have staff looked at other places where they can provide landscaping or where they can increase the amount of greenery or replace trees someplace else on site?
No, that's a great question, and with the applicant and I have gone back and forth multiple times trying to find this out. And again, I'm going to say it's a really tight spot, and maybe Josh can speak to this, but Tesla has a requirement of the number of parking spaces. I was hoping that could be reduced, but because of the high demand, they need to provide that. And if they do not, this is almost, we want to retain them and they just need that. So we try to reduce it by a couple along the strip, which I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Josh, I might not get that number right, but I think it was 27 parking spaces to at least provide a 2 to 3 foot buffer. But with how tight that site was, they couldn't achieve that. And also going up north, if you look at it, that's all existing parking, and there's really nothing that they can provide up north as well, because it is a tight site.
And most of the car dealerships further north don't have a 10-foot landscape buffer,
Correct.
do they?
Thank you. I can speak to one.
So in terms of precedent, there's a precedent that for car dealerships, because they want their inventory to be seen, right? That we haven't necessarily enforced that. In addition, in this area, I believe the city came through a number of years ago and literally cleared out
the landscape.
all the landscaping that was in that right of way, because it was either in very bad shape or it was invasive species, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
And given the lot configuration here, there really aren't
really hard.
many other options. And so, in terms of the business need versus the request, that's just something that I think that the commission should consider in evaluating this proposal.
You'll get a chance, so hang on. Any other questions, Commissioner Arnold?
No, thank you.
Commissioner Kirch?
So it isn't that there's no buffer there, correct? They're not mowing down all the wild stuff all the way up to the highway, are they?
No, they're not. There is green strip there, if you look at it.
It's not their property, it's an IDOT. I mean, it's a right of way.
so, right, so how wide is the IDOT right of way that they are not building into?
Probably at least 40 feet, I would say.
So isn't that a buffer enough?
Right, I mean.
Right.
You could say that, but it's not on their property though, right? So the zoning code is about your property, not
Okay.
someone else's and
Got
not
it,
public
okay.
property. So one needs to remember that. And so, yeah, I understand as a practical matter, there is, some grass, right? There is a buffer, yes, as a practical matter. It's just not on their property, so it doesn't meet the code requirement.
Thank you.
Yep.
Vice Chair?
Just a comment, I was looking at the overhead picture and you kind of see it right here, but the overhead picture on page 12. And, understandably, there's no buffer right now where this parking area is. And in fact, there's like off-street parking off of Old Skokie, and that's not really buffered with any kind of landscaping. So I guess I don't see, I would agree that we should grant the variance for this.
Commissioner Mantis?
No questions.
Student Commissioner Roberts?
No question.
I just have one quick question. First of all, the lot shape is really what drives this, so just to make that note. Am I looking at the plan right and seeing that, I would say a good portion of what is being extended is going to be permeable pavers and not asphalt? And I'm looking, just so you know, on page 25 of the packet, which is a bigger version of what you were looking at, right? And it seems to show that there's permeable pavers. I'll get to you, don't worry. Is that what am I reading that correctly?
That is correct. I know they worked with engineering because they do have a requirement with Lake County to meet, yeah.
Yeah, and I would say, just note that that kind of treatment is something that we like to encourage because it's a benefit of not having to build bigger storm sewers or underground detention facilities to be able to hold that water. So it's going to help control any runoff in that area in a more natural way. And so that probably also could be factored into, the fact that there's no landscaping per se. But as I mentioned before, and I happen to live up on the north end of town, so I'm familiar with all those dealerships. None of them have any landscaping per se, blocking the view of their inventory, right? And to be really blunt, car dealerships make up the largest part of our sales tax base, which is what hopefully keeps our property taxes reasonable. All right, with that, I know we have petitioners who are just chomping at the bit to get up there and talk to us about this. You need to come up to
Thank you, Chairman.
unfortunately, you need to come up to the microphone.
Thank you,
There
Chairman.
there
Thank you, everyone.
are literally thousands of people out there watching you on cable TV or streaming who want to meet you and hear from you. And please,
I'm Josh Silverglade. Thank you for
okay, can you spell your last name for the?
Silverglade, Silverglade.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you. And I didn't have a lot to add. So I'm
That's
glad
okay.
you waited for me at the end because you actually made many of the points that I was going to raise, which are that there is a buffer that exists between the expressway and us on the IDOT right-of-way. I second of all wanted to point out that the site, we do spend a lot of money on landscaping on site, and we're happy to continue to look into other ways to beautify the site. We and Tesla, our tenants, require that, and we spend a good amount of money, and I think of a nicely landscaped commercial site. We'll continue to spend money on that. And the lighting on our site is very modest. I think compared to many of the dealerships up throughout the community, it has a very tasteful appearance, and I was going to raise the permeable pavers that match all the beautiful permeable pavers that have been installed by the city. So it's going to be the exact same color. It'll be really nice. So thank you for hearing us
Just
out.
before you leave, and I open to questions from the commission, this expansion of your parking is going to allow you to continue to stay as a viable entity in Highland Park, correct? And that's why you're doing this.
I can't, critically so.
Yeah.
With, as you know, you may know, Tesla has spent a bunch of money over the last few years renting parking around the community at the old Toys R Us lot they park, at the old Fuddruckers parking lot they've used. There's not enough parking at this facility. Their original 10-year lease is coming up. They're willing to stay 10 more years here with this parking. And it's critical to keeping them here that we get this done.
That's great. And are you the landlord?
I developed the site and owned it for a number of years. I've since sold it to somebody and I'm
Okay,
here
so-
representing them.
Okay,
But I no longer own it.
So I understand the relationship.
Sure.
Questions for the petitioner, starting from my left, Jackson?
The only question I had was about the permeable pavers. Is the majority of the paving going to be permeable pavers?
If you look at the site plan, you can see at the southern end where it's
Put up
slight-
26, Carl, if you can put up the bigger plan.
there's a
of
different
that,
shading.
shows
It looks to
probably-
me like maybe a third of it looks to be a permeable paver.
And it,
You gotta come up and join them if you're gonna talk and identify yourself, so.
Yeah, I'll do it.
Yeah, open up the packet, it's page 26.
Graham Dursmith with Kaplan Paving. So to piggyback on your question for what Josh had commented on, prior to us laying this out and putting the design together, what we had proposed to them was literally the same unilock, river color, the same style that you guys just did with the expansion of the rest of the street going northbound up to their property. And so it was easy for me to say, this is what it's gonna look like because it was already installed by you guys. So to answer your question, it's about 2/5, 3/5. So
That's
it's
a
about
good-
15,000,
you're right.
15,000 square feet of asphalt and 10,000, just over 10,000 square feet of permeable pavers that'll go in.
and you're doing this both to improve stormwater retention and to help the wetland that's underneath the site, correct?
Correct. So it'll include, there's detention that has been figured into this to help absorb and hold water to help ease that pressure that going southbound. And then, as well as, it's just, it has its own unique characteristics to being there.
Okay.
So.
Thank you.
Go on,
The
Commissioner Arnold.
circular area, the drive around?
Yes.
What's going in the center of that?
I believe, if I recall, it is set as the same planted grasses that we've called for on where we are doing some restoration along the edge on this side and at the back edge within our building footprint. What they have spec'd here just below the cursor where you were just showing is those are the landscape species. So basically that's what.
Native grasses is what you're talking about, right?
Yes.
So that would be considered landscaping?
Yeah.
By the code, I would assume.
Correct, and I think that there was part of that also was favorable with the turnaround with the fire department, and if they needed to use that, there wasn't an obstacle, they could navigate around that in a healthier way, and it was safer for them as well.
That answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else, Jackson? No. Commissioner Mantis?
No questions.
Vice Chair?
No questions.
Commissioner
No question.
Birch? Anything else from Commissioner Arnold?
No.
I have said everything I need to say too, so. All right, anything else you all want to add? All right, is there anybody from the public who would like to comment on this? Seeing none.
I would,
I was going to
If I
say, do
may.
I have a motion? Yes, Commissioner Kirch.
I would move that we approve the design review for the car storage with variations at 1200 Old Skokie Road.
Do I have a second?
Seconded.
Seconded by Commissioner Mantis. Is this a roll call, sir? It is a roll call. Any discussion? Would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Arnold,
Yay.
Commissioner Mantis,
Aye.
Commissioner Kirch,
Aye.
Vice Chair Moore,
Aye.
Chairman Hainsworth.
Aye.
The ayes have it.
5 ayes, no nays, the motion passes. Go do good things. Thank you for your time and thank you for coming. All right, next item of business is design review for a proposed fence and variations at 425 Bloom Street.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rafa. Come back, don't just wait a year to come back.
No. I think Polly Acura is gonna come in, so I'll be coming back.
Okay, you're the official car person, huh?
It looks like it,
Yeah.
design review, more like it. Thank you,
Okay.
everybody.
Yep, thank you.
All right, good to see you. All right, back to Senior Planner Burhop, who's going to make this presentation, correct?
Yes, thank you,
All right.
Chair.
Go for it.
Okay, this is design review and fence variation for 425 Bloom Street. Project summary and site plan. So this is a snip of the site plan that was included in the packet. What is before the commission? A variation. The variation is for the materials. All fences are proposed to be PVC/vinyl, and they need a variation to the materials requirement. The fence is already installed. The red fence on this plan, that was approved with the PUD, though the PUD only looked at the location and height, and those are compliant. They didn't need any variations when this was done back in 2021, I think, or 2020. The blue and the green are new. My understanding is they're also installed. They meet the location and height. They're compliant with that. So this is new back here, and this is a dog run here. These are photos the applicant submitted of the fence that is installed. It is that white, it's the white fence. These are also photos the applicant submitted. I'll let the applicant discuss this as appropriate. I believe this is showing the neighbors. The applicant submitted in their narrative that fence they put up would appear similar to some fence that already exists in the neighborhood. That's the applicant's contention. That was in their narrative and in the photos they submitted. These are photos by the applicant. Materials, so this is a snip from the applicant's materials packet. Obviously, the color is white, but that is the material. I should have made that larger font, I'm sorry, but this is where the requirement from. So this development is considered multifamily. It was granted multifamily density when this went through back in, I believe it was 2020 and 2021.
No, and that one,
I think it was
20
22,
It was
21, 22.
21 to 22? Okay. I remember 21.
We were on
for sure.
Zoom, I know.
Yes. Yes.
Welcome,
Yeah.
Mr. Schwartz, by the way.
It all seems like a
So-
big television show.
Now we know what he looks like in person.
So this development,
That episode.
Yeah.
they're attached townhomes, but they're considered multifamily, and that's what property was rezoned to multifamily, and it was granted multifamily density. So it has to meet the multifamily requirements. And so in section 173.005, subparagraph G, I have it there verbatim. I'll just paraphrase. For if it's not a single family land use, they either have to, solid type fences either have to be masonry or smooth finished wood. So if it was either of those, this would be administrative, the locations met, the heights met. If it was either of those, this would be administrative, it'd be done and never come before the commission. But like I said, the applicant chose this material that's kind of a vinyl PVC material. This is an aerial of the site. The construction's a little further along than that. Though our new image is actually, it's pretty recent. It's
Yeah,
actually,
that's not too far.
it's actually not that bad.
I know that, but I mean, you had a bunch of the buildings up before.
So this just gives an image. There are single-family homes to the south and then around the corner here. And I'm actually not sure if this is a business or a single-family home that's adjacent. I believe it's a
It's
single-family
a
home.
single-family home.
I believe it is, or at least I included that on the notice list because the single-family homes did receive notice and a sign did go up. I never speak on behalf of neighbors. I let neighbors speak for themselves, but I will let the commission know. When the sign went up and the letters went out, I did get several phone calls. I explained, I got 3 or 4 phone calls. I explained to those neighbors what the project was, told them they'd come to the meeting, and their presence or absence, that's, again, I don't speak for neighbors, but at least 3 or 4 people did call, and I did explain what this was for. And then also in the report, there is an administrative design review that staff will approve after this is done. And I just put that up there in the report. It's for a meter vault that's going to be on site. It's required by code. That's my presentation. Thank you.
All right, questions for staff. Let's start with Commissioner Arnold.
So you said that it's already been installed, the fence?
That's
Even
correct.
What they're asking for variance on
That's
has already
correct.
been installed? How does that happen?
Well, how it came to me,
Because they do it.
how it came to me is that these were new, and since this is not a single-family home, this is a multifamily development, it came to me, and so I did my standard review and said, okay, well, meets the height, meet the location, let's also check the materials. And that's where the applicant, straightforward, transparently told me what the materials were, and I said, oh, well, that needs variation, so now it's here.
Having been on the ZBA, the fence is pretty easy. When I was on the ZBA back, several centuries ago, you'd be surprised, I would say once a year at least, we'd have somebody who was even granted a permit necessarily, and then it was discovered that they needed a variation, and the foundation was on, or in one case, the whole thing was built, and they had to come back and ask for a variation. It happens from time to time.
And
In this case, what they're asking for isn't necessarily a variation for anything but the material, correct?
it is for the material, and, oh, go ahead.
And that's the only reason they're here, is the difference in material.
That is correct. And
And I would think, and one of the things I would just note, and I was saying it to the vice chair, if we allow wood, we ought to be able to allow PVC, because more and more people are putting PVC fences up because they're easier to maintain and they last longer and the only reason it's not allowed here is because it's a multifamily residential. If it was a single family residential, they could put up whatever they wanted, right?
If this was single family, yes, this would not be before. There is no material consideration for single family.
So I could understand why it would be an honest mistake that he would, that somebody would think that looks around, he sees PVC fences all over the place. Why would he think that it wouldn't be permitted, right?
And Commissioner Arnold, just to address your comment, obviously, I'm not going to speak on behalf of the applicant. It is up to every property owner and every applicant to know the codes and comply with the codes. I explained to you how it came to me and how it came here. When this was approved back in 2021, the fence was discussed, but not in terms of materials. I did look at some of the reports and minutes from those meetings, and it looks like there was just a presumption that they would have complied with the materials, and it was never actually discussed. But the fence location and the height, that all was discussed and was approved back in 2021.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and just to note, as Carl did, if an applicant proposes to do something, it is assumed to be by code unless they're asking for a variation. So we don't literally necessarily ask at that time every single thing in the code, right? So the presumption is you're complying with the code unless you're requesting a modification through your PUD process or some other relief form. So in this case, that was not requested at that time. This was constructed ahead of this meeting. Yes.
Commissioner Kirch,
So what's the other fencing on the site? I don't remember, I think I was
it's all white,
only on
it's all
the,
the same.
Yeah, I believe all the fences is of that color and material. The only difference is that the dog run is going to be 4 feet in height, is where the rest of it is all 6 feet in height.
so we already, when we approved this PUD, we approved the PVC fencing.
No, I don't,
We-
nope, I don't believe that's correct. What-
Approve the
I was just
fence,
saying.
location,
Yeah.
and height.
Yeah.
right?
Correct.
Not the
There was
material.
nothing requested in terms of a modification at that time.
Correct.
So when someone doesn't request the modification as part of that, it's presumed that you're meeting the code. And then, unless you ask for a modification.
So do we need to grant a variance for all of the fencing now?
Just the material.
The material for all of
But
it,
it's,
yes.
it's not just the blue and the green. I mean,
Correct.
We're
It's for-
granting the red, okay.
You're precisely correct. It's for all red, blue, and green. And again, Commissioner Kirch, because again, I did look at this. I looked at the approval documents. I read some of the reports. And the fence was discussed in 2021, but not the materials. I did not see anything about the materials in the report or in any of the presentations. And I discussed it with the applicant in advance, and the applicant was transparent and I believe honest with me and said no, they were not for the materials back then. It was just presumed that it would comply, and like I said, how it came to me, we found out it didn't, so.
Good.
Thank you.
Jackson.
No questions.
Commissioner Mantis.
So, the red fence was what was approved originally. The blue and green on this is already up, but has not been approved.
Yes, because that is kind of a weird way to look at it. I mean, they received permit for it because it meets the location and the height requirement, but then, like I said, it was brought to me, and so it needs to be approved for the variation for the materials. Wait, right? Yes.
So what's the red fence made out of?
The same thing, the
Okay.
PVC
Everything's the
vinyl.
same thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I guess my question is, they only had approval to put up fencing where the red is, not to put where the green and blue is?
No, I don't think that's accurate. Let me put it a different way. The red fence was approved as part of the PUD, correct? And the blue and green were approved as a regular permit because they meet the code requirements. They wouldn't need to have any kind of variation for that, other than the material, correct?
But at the time we approved the PUD, we did not call out a material for the
Yeah,
red fence.
actually, as I think about
That
this,
part I get.
and I want to make sure I understand it correctly too, and we can certainly ask the applicant. I mean, the blue and the green, because this came to me from the building division, because they identified that actually it's the green, the dog run. This all came to me because of the green.
Okay.
Because the building division identified that as being new, and this is not a single-family use, and the building division knows that needs design review. And so that's when I said that this had to go to the commission. So actually, we should confirm if that green is up or not, because the green should technically not be up. The rest of it,
We'll ask.
the rest of it's a little more complicated because, the PUD did approve it and they got a permit for it. And then now it's been revealed that it wasn't the right materials. But the green ones should definitely not be up, though.
We'll ask him when he gets up here. Any other questions?
No other questions for me.
Vice Chair?
No, I think I just asked it.
No, I think the only thing I would say, well, two things. I would note that once upon a time in Highland Park, we did not permit dog runs, and I know a certain attorney who shall be nameless, who lives in town, who had a dog run, and I think got the ordinance changed, and he usually sits where Marcus is. The only other thing I'll once again reiterate is I think that we ought to take a look at that standard in terms of smooth wood. I don't have a problem personally with smooth PVC, right? Would I have rather seen something other than white? Maybe, but that's very minor, and I don't think that's up to me to regulate. So in terms of where we are, the only other comment I would make is to the developer, and I will tell you, and I'll tell you two things. First of all, one of my colleagues is one of your neighbors. And when this was being built, he did ask what was going on, right, when it was here before. He had not mentioned anything about the fence. So I'm assuming that's, again, reiterating kind of what Carl said, that when they understood what it was about, the neighbors had no problem with it, apparently, because they haven't shown up, they haven't inquired. I'll just tell you that I think that this development has come out very well. It's a lovely development. I give you a lot of credit for that, and I think that hopefully you are seeing very brisk rentals of it, because I think it's a needed product in town, and I thought you did a really good job. With that, if you would come up and then tell us whether the dog run is up or not up yet.
Yeah, thank you.
And identify
Carl,
yourself.
Thank you. David Schwartz on behalf of
Spell your last
Blue Book, SCHWARTZ.
Okay.
So thank you guys, and for the questions. I think it's all covered pretty thoroughly. And I do want to apologize for kind of getting ahead of the game. We knew, the fence location and everything and height and all that stuff was approved. And as we were sort of looking at the materials, the PVC fence was actually more expensive. And literally, if you stand on this property, you can see a PVC fence on the little houses to the east, and then across the alley, there's also a PVC fence. So it seemed to perfectly fit in the context. It didn't occur to us that the material wouldn't be allowed because clearly the material was allowed in the city, it's just not allowed for this use. So that's where we sort of made the wrong assumption and didn't go back and check what the material said, in terms of the code for the use. And then as it pertains to what we added for the dog run, we had discussed that and we were under the assumption that that could be done with an administrative review and wouldn't need to be, and, since it was on the property and complied with everything else that it was, and we weren't getting rid of any landscaping.
Is it
We
up?
just, it's up.
Okay.
Yeah. So we just relocated the trees that are on the plan just to, inside of it, and we didn't get rid of any trees.
Questions for the applicant, Commissioner Arnold?
No. I mean, it's up, right?
Yes.
Commissioner Kirch?
How is the project doing?
Very, very well, thank you. We have one left to lease, if you guys know anybody. So 21 of 22 are leased.
Nice. Great.
So one was to a Chicago
find
Bear
another
who
one.
got traded.
Yeah, that's,
Right.
we have
Go
another,
find more property.
we have
for
another
this
site
thing.
like that.
Yeah, we're looking for it. We're looking. So if you're right.
Jackson says no questions. Commissioner Mantis?
No questions.
Commissioner, Vice Chair?
No questions.
I don't have any questions, except that even with an administrative review, you should wait until the administrative review is done before you put it up.
Understood.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any comments from the public? Nobody here. Okay,
As the public, I would like to comment.
yeah, okay. Get it back up to the,
No, I'm just kidding.
thank you.
Okay.
And now we know what you look like in person, and, you couldn't wear shorts to the hearing like you could probably when you were on Zoom. Okay, do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, if I could move approval of the design review for the existing fence, approving the variation on the fence at 425 Bloom Street.
Do I have a second?
Seconded.
Seconded by Commissioner Mantis. Motion is made by Commissioner Courage. Any discussion? All right, please call the roll.
Commissioner Arnold,
Yes.
Commissioner Mantis,
Aye.
Commissioner Kirsch,
Aye.
Vice Chair Moore,
Aye.
Chairman Haynes for the.
Aye. 5 ayes, no nays, motion passes.
Okay.
Thank you, Dave.
Was your packet missing?
Nice job.
Yeah.
Don't,
It was hard to read.
Read it code.
don't come back with a variance, though, after the fact, please.
Just a question, who would, your suggestion about changing the fence code, who would,
Is that's a text amendment, right, Joel?
Correct. We've heard that as staff, and we'll bring it back to the city
Thank you.
manager, and we'll discuss that, and ultimately,
I would hope
something like that
that-
would be, while in your purview, isn't a chapter 150 consideration, it's chapter 176, so it would go directly to city council.
I just note that the reason they do it, I mean, as the petitioner said, it's more expensive, and I only know that from other people who put them up. But it's certainly more durable, if you look at what the design review code tries to get at is, and that's durable materials, right? Particularly in commercial and multifamily environments, and PVC is definitely more durable than wood these days. And it's more sustainable in some ways, because it's usually made out of recycled material.
And I also think that you hit the nail on the head there with the distinction. This multifamily developments are considered commercial.
Yes.
Sometimes people don't recognize that, but technically they are. There's single family and then there's multifamily.
They're making money for somebody,
So
Okay.
that's why it's grouped together.
All right, next item is continuation of public hearing 2023-ZTA-007 for a zoning code text amendment and to modify section 150.402 and section 150.505 related to plan development and plan unit development requirements and applicability, as well as other sections of the zoning code of chapter 150 of the city code as appropriate, and staff is seeking a continuance
Yes, we-
on this till November
The next meeting.
22nd,
Regularly scheduled
right?
meeting.
21st.
21st. All right. Do I have a motion to continue this to November 21st?
So moved.
Moved by Vice Chair Moore. Do I have a second?
Seconded.
Seconded by Commissioner Mantis. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose. That item will be continued to the next meeting on the 21st.
In this room.
Okay, I gotta get my
In this
script.
room, Mr. Chairman?
In this room, there'll be no additional notice.
Was it already opened, or
Yes, it was.
This one was.
Yeah.
The next one wasn't.
it wasn't? Okay.
I don't think we opened the
The
10th.
PUD was opened already. So
Yeah.
we just continued. So
No, correct.
This particular one.
No, I'm talking about.
10th was not.
Oh, we did not open that yet.
That's why I'm desperately looking for my script. So wait a second while I find it, because I have it somewhere. There we go. Okay,
Chair, I have a
Yes.
notes, if we could just hold quick. I think we did open it just to continue it.
we did?
We did.
Okay,
That's what I thought.
then I don't have to read the script. Darn, what's a plan commission meeting without the
That
script?
must have been the
I
one
mean,
where we did 5.
No, it probably was. I'm very disappointed. It's not gonna be too much longer. I'm not gonna get to read the script. All right, you can.
I can make you.
No, you can't. All right, next item of business is continuation of a public hearing, 2023-ZTA-010 for a zoning code text amendment to modify regulations for tents and similar structures and other sections of the zoning code, chapter 150 of the city code, as appropriate. Okay, Senior Planner Burhop, are you making this presentation?
Yes, sir.
All right, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So this is a zoning text amendment for tent regulations. So as with all zoning text amendments or public hearings, the commission should open the public hearing, take testimony, consider the request and deliberate, and provide feedback as appropriate. Staff will bring FOF, that's findings of fact, to the next meeting as appropriate. There are not findings of fact in this packet. Staff are asking for feedback from the commission. On October 10th, at the city council's meeting, they adopted a resolution directing the commission, the PDC, the Plan and Design Commission, to hold a hearing, a public hearing, and make a recommendation related to tents. I had this text in the report, but the gist of it is to amend Article 4 of the zoning code concerning whether and to what extent tents and other temporary accessory structures should be regulated, including without limitation, limits on the number of days per year during which a tent or similar structure may be installed on a property used for single-family residential uses, and so on, and other amendments that may be related as appropriate. So this one is coming from the city council. You know, the commission gets different types of zoning text amendments. Some of them are initiated by the city manager, and some of them are initiated by the city council, and this one was initiated by the city council. Council direction. So the council discussed a couple things at their meeting on October 10th, at its meeting on October 10th. This included such thing as length of time limitations, including maximum number of days a tent could be erected, and if a permit could be extended to keep up a tent, and if so, for how long. Council discussed various day options, 30 or 60 day for the initial duration, and they talked about should there be extensions, and also to consider such provisions that account for tents for the need associated with emergencies such as the pandemic or related to construction activity. I think I'm already almost done. Yeah, I am. This is my last slide. So staff put out recommendations, but I would also just call them suggestions as well to get the commission to, think and deliberate and provide feedback. So these are discussion points. So number one, tents in residential zoning districts should be permitted for not more than 45 days per calendar year unless extended for a maximum of an additional 30 days per calendar year. So that could be a code provision in terms of limitations. Tents in non-residential zoning districts could be permitted for not more than 180 days per calendar year. Tents less than or equal to 100 square feet in footprint or coverage do not require permit. That is also something that should be codified. And then other additional changes as applicable. That is the presentation.
Yes, Council Liaison Lidauer, and hopefully you can tell us what kind of,
I was going to say, I'd like to give
what
a
kind
little
of
context.
precipitated this, if you don't
I'd like
mind.
to give a little context to the commission.
Speak into the
because-
mic so they can hear you. I know that.
I'd like to give a little context to the commission
Thank you.
because the council received several complaints. And during COVID, this became more of, I don't want to say a norm, but tents did go up. And it's one thing when someone is having a large party celebration at their home. Maybe they put the tent up 2 weeks before the actual event so they can stage it. Maybe it takes them 2 weeks to take it down because it was a big family event. They go out of town after. So we wanted to be accommodating. There are times, and certain things like a tent might be used for religious purposes for a holiday. And the holiday is a week, it's actually a 10-day long holiday, 8-day long. And the first 2 days and the last 2 days are the most religious. So you put it up right after Yom Kippur and you keep it up for a longer duration. So there were reasons why a temporary structure is recognized, it's fine. We wanted to be inclusive. We wanted to make sure that we let people do what they want in their backyards. But during COVID, in part because many people couldn't go other places, wanted an additional room, wanted their kids to be able to be outside to play. There are many reasons why people might have put up a temporary structure. There's one particular case where the structure's been up for 3 years. The structure is almost as large as the actual permanent structure, meaning the house.
Right.
Even though it is in the backyard, it is so large that it can be seen by all the neighbors and it obstructs views. So there was one precipitating area, which was the reason for the complaint from various neighbors who attempted to speak to their neighbor cordially and pleasantly, and then determined, to be fair, that because COVID was a special circumstance, and there was understanding that people may have used things as a staging ground, like a tent, to have a barbecue, but then when the weather got bad, the tent stayed up. But 3 years later, it has become sort of a blight to the neighborhood. And so that's the specific reason, and enough council members received very loud complaints and talked to the neighbors who were quite reasonable. And we determined that it's actually a larger issue, especially in light of the way now people take advantage of their backyards, which is wonderful, their side yards and whatnot. But we thought because of that, it should be codified.
Thank you.
We wanted to be reasonable. We wanted to ask you to consider it. That's why we asked staff and worked with staff to get certain parameters on it, and we leave it to you now.
So let me ask a question since you brought it up, but I mean, maybe it has to do with how you define a tent, right? Because I wouldn't think of a sukkah, which is what you were describing, as a tent because it's open, there's no, it's open to the air above you, right? For instance.
I would consider it 10. I don't want to,
Right.
I respectfully
I just
No,
wanted to.
I just want to make sure.
No.
We,
That-
as
that's
long as we're
exactly right. They're
codifying
completely
things.
separate.
Yeah.
But I do
Thank you.
use that as an example.
Right.
Only because it is a holiday when people would put a temporary structure up.
Or people have
And
wedding,
I don't think this should be limited. That's why I think it's
Well,
important to get the.
And I'll tell
Writing
you,
correct.
at our synagogue, which is not in Highland Park, we are building a patio that will be pre-set up for a tent, right? It won't have a tent on it, but the anchors would be there so that if somebody wanted to have a wedding or whatever outside on this patio, it would be very easy to pitch a tent.
Right.
But that tent will come, it's not like at the Lincolnshire Marriott where they have basically a tent, a year-round
Year-round.
tent that's air conditioned and heated with, glass windows. I will also point out that where I work at University of Illinois Chicago at the hospital, during COVID, we had a tent on our property to do COVID, to do
Right.
screening. And that was up longer, that was probably up for a year. So, in a case of an emergency like that, I think we ought to consider exactly how long we think is reasonable. 3 years, obviously, not reasonable, right? It should come down, somewhere there should be language in the ordinance possibly that it should be removed, if it's put up for an emergency purpose, it should be removed within a reasonable length of time after the emergency passes, right? So that it's not necessarily rather than having them come in and ask for extensions every
30
6
days.
months or whatever it is, be understanding of the fact that, okay, there are extenuating circumstances sometimes where a commercial entity, which I would differentiate from a residential entity, needs a tent for whatever reasons. And so, if a tornado ripped through town,
Right.
we'd want to have somebody put a tent up as, to triage people maybe, or whatever. That should, in my mind, that should be permitted, and it should be permitted for the duration of the emergency,
Yeah.
which is something that's declared, right?
Yeah, and I think we tried to say in our memo, we will definitely address any emergency things.
Yeah.
Exceptions would be made for, declared emergencies and other things. And
Right.
that's something, the pandemic is a perfect.
But I would make
We
sure
would
that-
not be
Yeah.
requiring permit or anything, there'd just be exceptions.
But personally, I don't see why, go back to your recommendations for a second, if you don't mind, Carl.
Then we
Because
also
I
want
want
to make
that
sure
number.
the time
I mean,
period was long enough to account for
40
holidays like you
yeah,
were saying.
45 days seems to be more than reasonable to me.
Originally, we had discussed 30, and
yeah.
then we decided to be extremely reasonable and leave it for 45.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking 32, but I see, for 15 days, I'm not going to get
Look,
too upset.
as Carl said, this is, the purpose of staff putting something forward is to merely as facilitation here. We are seeking your input.
Well,
Don't view this as like, if we felt very strongly with it, we would say so. But what we did is we heard what the council said. Some were saying 30, some were saying 60 with a 60-day, extensions. Others were saying 30 with a 30-day. So,
I
we're
think-
trying to get this kind of.
I think
facilitated.
45 days is a good meeting point,
that's
right?
what we were trying
I
to
think 30 days, as Liaison Lidauer said, there could be reasons why it should be up for that long, right? That are reasonable.
And we were thinking about religious holidays as well, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, okay.
Might not be that long.
But
nonetheless.
I'm thinking, okay, as Commissioner, as Vice Chair, Liaison Lidauer, I'm sorry, said, 2 weeks before, 2 weeks after, that to me is pretty reasonable. I mean, that's kind of the 30-day range. We're giving them a little grace period with 15 additional days. I don't think, I'm looking at extending it to 75. That to me,
That's pretty long.
that's a long time, right? I'm not sure I would like to see it extended that long personally, but I will let that up for discussion. The 180 days, 6 months, that's a pretty long time, if it's not an emergency situation. And I'm not sure I wouldn't favor
90.
a smaller time. I mean, I'd even go, 90, I think is fair. That's basically the summer. And then the 100 square feet, that's 10 by 10. That's kind of small. I don't know whether that,
I
don't know how-
We don't want to get into permitting, kids
I
sleeping
know
in the
that.
backyard and.
I know
things
that. I mean,
like that.
100 square feet's going to cover, and I don't know about you, I think I've seen kids' tents that are bigger than 10 by
They're
10
pretty-
out there. Jackson may know better than I do. I don't know. I'm not a big,
But to be
camper
clear,
these
there would
days.
still be the time restriction. Just because you don't
Right.
issue a permit doesn't mean that there isn't the time, unless we exempt from the time restriction, the 10 by 10s. That's not what's being said. It's just saying
No.
that there wouldn't be a permit, but
Right.
it can't just be up there for years and years either, though, right? So
Right.
if there was a request for enforcement, then we would start a clock ticking and say, well, you need to
Tree-
get you need to get this down. in-
tree houses fall in this category? I mean, I hate
No,
to
this
say
is
that.
not a treehouse thing. This
Okay.
is just tents. We're not expanding that, yeah.
Can I ask a couple
Sure.
questions?
Well, it's kind of free for all.
Do you require a survey for people to put up,
No,
um,
not for something like that.
not for something like this?
No, I mean, there's certain setback requirements and things like that, but, no, I mean, we have to be careful not to require things that just make things entirely unreasonably in terms of expense. If you don't want to have tents, then I would say just don't. But, having so many requirements to be reviewed, it's just it's
Onerous.
a temporary structure, and so the flexibility should be there.
I'm only asking because my neighbor recently installed a construction fence across my yard, so.
Well, that
a
if
little
they're
bit-
doing construction, they're
I mean-
supposed to have
They're supposed to be on their property.
and it's
got-
supposed to have a
You-
permit.
You would hope, yeah. No, I was told that a
survey.
construction fence doesn't require a permit. that they can go install a construction fence to prepare for it before their permit is received. And their survey was from 1983.
I understand.
Um,
So there are particular cases where there's a problem like that and they need to rectify that. But yes, we do require, before issuance of a permit, tree fencing and such, that has to be installed prior to the issuance of the permit because we don't want to issue the permit until we get the protection in place.
I also heard that this so-called tent had some lighting involved in it that was glaring into people's bedrooms.
It's not before us tonight, but the lighting code would pertain to that. And various enforcement actions could be taken depending on what the situation is.
Yeah, because I think that was part of the problem with the tent is that
Including kitchens and all sorts of other things.
in the tent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is
And-
a different.
And by the way,
fire
the
code.
10 by 10, I think, is very important because this happens to be on a large piece of property.
Right.
There are several properties in Highland Park where somebody has a very nice but small backyard. So if someone puts up a 14 by 14 foot tent, that takes up the entire backyard.
Right.
And so I think the problem is completely proportional
Yeah.
for those people in their backyards to the one that we have out there right now, which is enormous. or
Right. Yeah, well, I think it's really problematic when people don't know where their own property lines are and they don't have current surveys and then whether they put in fencing, whether it's temporary or permanent. And, it just doesn't, it's kind of, protecting the neighbors in some way, like without restricting people's rights to do what they want to do on their property. And what kind of fine line do you take there? And
So
I think that's the gist of it, right?
let me ask a question. When they come for a permit on a tent like this, would they have to submit a site plan with it, even
Yeah.
just shown on the
Or-
site
or
plan,
like
right?
an existing survey that's on file. It may be old, but that would probably.
They're gonna have to have some kind of site plan that shows where it's gonna go,
Yeah.
Yep,
right?
that's correct.
So that may would hopefully solve some of the problems
Most.
that you're bringing up, which are very valid.
Yeah.
They're very valid concerns, I think. What else?
Well, if I hadn't just experienced it, I wouldn't never have thought of it. But
Well,
it is really
And
egregious,
you,
so.
and I'm sure the city staff hears a lot of times when there's any construction that all of a sudden there's drainage issues, right? And they're supposed to do spot surveys to show that they're not draining water onto their neighboring property and, part of that is just perception perhaps, but, again, it's a real problem because what we don't want to have happen is just like what you're saying. You don't want anything you're doing on your property to have an adverse effect on your neighbors,
Right,
particularly if you're a good neighbor,
right.
right? Anything else?
No, I think that it's important. I think 45 days is a lot of time in a 30-day extension. And it's almost half the summer, the whole
Right.
summer that you're allowing people to put up a tent in their backyard. And I think it's pretty generous. So, yeah, and 180 days is pretty generous too. So it should be a temporary structure.
So what are you thinking, that you'd rather see it 30 days in residential and 90 days in non-residential?
Yeah, I would, and if somebody's having a wedding or an event and, if they're putting up a large tent and it's expensive, the 30 days is more than enough to have a temporary structure up in your backyard. I mean, that's the whole month of July, somebody's
Right.
gonna have a tent with.
And if you
flashing
need it for
lights on.
longer than 30 days, you have an option to get it extended, right?
Right.
So to use, Councilwoman Lidauer's point, 2 weeks before, 2 weeks after, that's 28 days, let's say, or 30 days.
Right.
Then you can extend it for another period of time, which we can debate how long that is. That should allow you to go on a vacation in between and still get it down. And let's be honest, most of these people they don't own the tent. They're renting the tent. So even if they're away from home, whoever they rented the tent from, I would assume would come out and take it down. Right? Any other thoughts, guys, ladies? Yes, Jackson?
Does a gazebo count as a tent? No? Okay. That was,
Permanent structure.
well, the only thing with that being a permanent structure is I do know some people, because we do have harsh winters here in Chicago, to put that lightly. You take down those structures if they're flimsy or they're old, just so they don't get, basically, they don't collapse underneath the
And
structure.
then put them back up in the spring?
Yeah, then you
Is that
put
what
it back
said?
up.
That's interesting.
That actually does raise a interesting thing. Everybody started doing gazebos in the pandemic, or I'm sorry, not gazebos,
Pergolas.
igloos
Oh, yeah.
during
Oh,
the
yeah.
pandemic.
Yurts.
So does that count as a tent?
Yurts?
Boy, I missed out on
Yurts?
that.
But did
That's a
people do
great
those in a residential area?
How about tiny houses?
So I'm kind of, I don't like when we start meddling in people's backyards. And I think that maybe this is more of a use question than what is the tent being used for? I don't know. I'm kind of,
Well, we do meddle in, I mean, the zoning ordinances regulate certain things about the backyards, including lot coverage.
I get
right?
it, but what I put in my backyard, I mean, what is it that, there were a lot of specific things about this complaint. I think you make bad laws off a single complaint and a single incident. There are a lot of specifics about this one that are behavioral, excuse me, and not anything beyond that. So I just would be immensely cautionable about, I don't think we're defining what we want to regulate very well here. In tents in non-residential districts, I think we're thinking about people that put them up for summer carnival. I'm thinking about the winter. And I think especially commercial businesses, and again, especially from the pandemic, that those tents are maybe more useful from November to the end of April than they are in the summer months. So I think that
But with 180 days, we're not telling them when they can put it up, but you're giving them a 6-month window.
Well, that's
So
why I wouldn't cut-
To use your,
November, December, January, February,
Right.
March, April, that's
Kinda
6.
right
So
there.
I'm on the 180, not the 90, that's what
But
I'm saying.
that's in an emergency.
No.
No,
not
no.
necessarily.
No, I meant we were allowing tents during the emergency situation without any kind of timeline. This is
Correct.
if you wanted to have an outdoor tent for whatever
If-
during a non-emergency
Or even rump
time.
season type
If
stuff.
a restaurant, let's say, wanted to have outdoor, or continue outdoor dining through the winter, right? And put up a tent during
Right.
the winter so they could have increased seating capacity, right?
Right.
Without having to build a building.
Right, that's the 180
That's
days.
the 180 days, right?
Right.
Right.
And then I also think the square footage requirement on tent, I don't think that's the right way to go about it. I think that there are two different types of tents we're talking about. We're talking about event tents, and we're talking about camping tents or, backyard kid tents, and those are two entirely different entities. So I would,
So one of the things I'm hearing is, and I heard it, I think, when Jackson kind of started his discussion, we need to very clearly define what a tent is and what a tent isn't, right?
that we wish to regulate.
Right. And, so there, I mean, you could talk about yurts, you could talk about, all kinds of, because, these temporary gazebos, you could talk about religious structure, you could talk about a lot of things that people might not consider to be a tent, right? But yet, is that one of the things we're trying to regulate?
But I think that's the point here.
Yeah.
To Commissioner Kirch's point, I'm not saying we should over-regulate. As a matter of fact, I think getting into the woods on it, which is why I think saying
Where you
intent
pitch your tent.
or temporary structure, which leaves it open
Yeah.
and then questionable, and then staff makes a determination at some point, or the council gets complaints because the yurt is bigger than 10 by 10.
Right.
but it's not enumerated. It is a temporary structure. So I think if you get too far into the weeds, no pun intended, you are really regulating what goes in the backyard.
So maybe you want to define, instead of tents, you want to say temporary structure, right?
Yeah, tents and temporary structure. You certainly can use the word tents and temporary structures in anything that we do, and I agree, that's fine. That can be generally
They're
then.
a portable
captured.
structure, the roof of which
Right.
and one half or more of the sides are constructed of nylon. See, that's getting pretty darn specific
understand.
there.
Yep.
I think that's overly specific, right?
Well, look, the council sent the commission the resolution, to look into this, and it included structures, right? So this is what
Well, I think-
Councilmember Lidower is pointing out, is that's how you can get around the specificity issue while not missing something.
Right.
And I think that's a very good point.
Yeah.
That should probably be what it is. And certainly, like I said earlier, if there is extenuating circumstances or emergencies, that can be built into the code. Don't worry about it.
And I think,
We'll make sure.
and I hear, that's what I hear is we're looking for, and what I think I'm hearing is a consensus to say, rather than just limit it to tents, say temporary structures such as tents, yurts, whatever,
Yeah.
whatever it is, as examples,
Yep, I
right,
think that's fair.
to do that.
Yep.
Then what I'm also hearing is, and I mean, I don't mean to shortchange anybody from giving an opinion. What I was hearing is the residential side should probably be closer to 30 days with extensions. And that they're okay. I think I've gotten some consensus, well, maybe I haven't heard consensus yet, on the non-residential zoning districts. But I also know I heard consensus of, in the event of an emergency, it can be up until the emergency is declared over. And then we would want it removed within a certain period of time that we should put into the code, right?
What would just happen then is they would need to get a permit.
Yeah.
I mean, once the
Right,
emergency's
okay.
over, the code
Then the code kicks in.
Comes back in,
Then
right?
the code
There's no
kicks
longer
in.
the
Okay,
exception. Yeah.
that's fine.
So then they would need to come in
That's
for
fine.
permits or.
That'll take care of when it has to go away.
So I think I was the only one who didn't yet opine on the
Sorry.
number of, that's all right, on the number of days. For residential, I'd say like 30 days with an extension of 15. And so that keeps it from being up the entire summer, and that allows a family to have more than one celebration in a particular year.
But again,
they-
I
the
think,
other
I
thing we
think
were
if we're
thinking
going into this limited time frame, we do need to get a better definition of, coming back to that better definition of what a tent is. For example, the gazebo that again, they take down during the winter so it doesn't get crushed by snow. These people want to leave that up all summer and possibly a little bit into the fall, so they're able to appreciate that shade during that time. So possibly, like, something I've been mulling over here is that I know Council Liaison mentioned that the complaint, it also came because of the tent that in question was obstructing views of the neighbors, correct? You could see the
Just
tent from
overall
everywhere.
size.
So maybe we do it based on also height, like if the tent is above a certain height, it has to get a permit, or restriction, just so like those party tents that are tall.
Yeah, I don't know
I don't
that,
think
I don't think you want to go there.
Okay.
So I see on page 111, footnote number 5, it does say, the zoning code regulates tents as an accessory structure. They're allowed to be blah, 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 in the buildable area of the property. They have to meet the 3-foot setback within the required rear yard and no more than 30% coverage. So we are kind of covering like percentage wise of how big it can be for a lot. So like Councilwoman Lidower said, it could, 100 by 100 tent in a very small lot is going to take up much of the lot. 100 by 100 in a larger lot is going to take up a much smaller percentage. So I mean, it sounds like this is already covered.
Yeah, I would just counsel, I don't think we should expand the scope of this beyond, yes, and unless there's any particular problems with that being.
Your plug
Way that-
is on the other side, rolling around.
I think council gave some direction to staff and without meaning to usurp your positions, which is why we wanted it to come to you after staff took the first kind of hit at this. And we wanted you to tailor it a little bit more. But frankly, we didn't want to overregulate. We just wanted to address temporary structures and the tent. And I think that, there was a good initial step done by staff with guidance from council. And I think your impressions will really kind of narrow that down enough.
Do you have the feedback that you're looking for, guys?
Yeah, I mean, we'll take it from here and provide, again, a recommendation back, thinking, based on what we heard and see, what the commission thinks, and we'll go from there. I think that did help, make sure that we're not just talking about tents, and because there are these other structures, and nowadays things are relatively inexpensive, right?
Yes.
So there's a bunch of other things out there.
Yep.
I do point out that, we have to be careful about, inflatable pools and things like this too. So we'll work on that.
Okay.
Okay? Those are more than.
When do you want to bring this back? Next meeting or the meeting
Chairman,
following?
I think the following meeting.
So December 5th.
December 5th is a regularly scheduled meeting, Carl, is that correct?
Yeah, I think it is.
Calendar open.
Let me take a look. Hold on.
Yes, that's right. December 5th is the.
Yep.
Correct.
All right, I'm looking
There
for
we
a
go.
motion then to continue this matter till December 5th.
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Kirch, seconded by Vice Chair Moore. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed. Motion passes. This will be continued to our regularly scheduled meeting of December 5th, 7 o'clock, City Council Chambers. There will be no additional notice.
Thank you all.
One other quick question before we leave this, and I know we just continued it. Do they have tents at Ravinia?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
They have them on the outskirts.
Would you check with Ravinia, Joel, before this comes back and see if they have any comments on this?
Interesting. Good catch.
Sure.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Again, yes, that's correct. I understand. Yep.
All right. Any administrative or design review updates?
No, there are not.
Thank you. The next regular meeting will be November 21st, 2023, right here in City Council Chambers at 7 o'clock in the evening. Case briefing, Mr. Fontaine?
Mr. Chairman, I do not have a case briefing this evening. No.
That's fine. Okay, any business from the public? No, there's no public here to have any business from. Do I have a motion to adjourn so council liaison, or not, Corporation Council Martinez can catch the 8:37?
I wanted to talk on the record for maybe 1 or 2 hours, if possible.
No, you are out of order and not recognized, sir. Do I have a motion to,
Let us time you.
do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Vice Chair Moore, seconded by?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Kirch. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you for, as usual.